Olá, bem-vindas e bem-vindos. Eu sou a Mariana Almeida e este é o McKinsey Talks, direto do estúdio da McKinsey em São Paulo. O episódio de hoje vai mergulhar mais fundo na cadeia de suprimentos para entender como ferramentas digitais são cada vez mais imprescindíveis para lidar com quantidades massivas de dados. Estamos vivendo um novo momento histórico nas cadeias de suprimentos. Na sua última grande mudança nos anos 80 e 90, quando priorizaram a produção em países com mão de obra mais barata, as cadeias teceram as veias da globalização e mudaram a paisagem econômica do mundo. Mas na sequência de enormes disrupções, incluindo a pandemia e também a guerra na Ucrânia, a resiliência da cadeia tem tomado a dianteira nas prioridades. Uma pesquisa no McKinsey Global Institute mostra que setores com cadeias complexas perdem em média cerca de 4% do seu lucro ao ano com disrupções em suas operações. Isso representa 40% do lucro de um ano em 10 anos. Para contornar os imprevistos e ter maior visibilidade, a cadeia de suprimentos atual conta com fornecimento de mais de um agente, regionalização e aumento de estoque, entre outras medidas. Porém, com mais opções e variáveis, elas estão também cada vez mais complexas de se gerir. E daí o papel crítico da analítica avançada, da automação e do machine learning para sustentar as melhores decisões. E para falar sobre como as ferramentas digitais podem tornar as cadeias de suprimento mais resilientes, temos mais uma vez aqui conosco no estúdio o Lapo Mori, sócio da McKinsey baseado em Denver e um dos nossos especialistas mundiais em transformação de cadeias de suprimentos. Por isso, a nossa conversa hoje será em inglês. Welcome again, Lapo. It's such a pleasure to have you here again with us.
Thank you for having me here.
Great. E para não mexer em time que está ganhando, recebemos também o Edson Guimarães, sócio associado da McKinsey em São Paulo e líder da prática de supply chain no Brasil. Obrigada, Edson. Muito bom ter você aqui de novo também conosco.
Obrigado, Mari. É um prazer estar aqui novamente.
Legal. So let's get started. Edson, on a McKinsey article, the author says that multi-tier transparency is the holy grail of supply chain risk management. So let's get further there. Can you explain a little bit how digital technology can make supply chains resilient and provide this end-to-end visibility?
Sure. So supply chains, they have a high complexity, and nowadays with an increasing number of variables for you to take decisions pretty much on a daily or even hourly basis, right? And enabling a true end-to-end visibility requires a high frequency of data refresh, apart from having the data, right, for you to take these decisions. Most companies, they are actually looking at static data, maybe weekly or even monthly. And this is actually something that impacts the ability and the agility for them to take decisions fast, right? And here comes like the digital supply chain tools, leveraging advanced analytics mostly, because they can actually analyze a huge amount of data. They can understand the relationships between these variables, calculating multiple possibilities in a very fast manner, providing them visibility for the operations to take decisions, right? There's also, as you mentioned, machine learning with predictive algorithms that can support you better predict your demand or your sales road price, for example, which is a factor in Brazil super critical for many kind of industries. And of course, with this visibility, with a better intelligence predicting these variables, and with tools that enable you to create scenarios for the decision making, they also recommend the optimal the optimal scenarios for you to follow on your supply chain.
Yeah, in volatile times, it seems essential.
It is.
Lapo, what are the solutions for all these problems that he was mapping out?
So it's many problems, and for many problems you need many solutions. There's a few I would call out. First one is real-time data, automation and visualization, like accessing data on a very frequent basis, and also being able to visualize the complex relationship between the different data. This typically is implemented in what we call control towers, which is control centers similar to what you have in the airport, but for your supply chain. You can monitor everything that happens across the whole chain and take quick decision. The second example I would bring is advanced analytics-based forecasting. Like forecasting in supply chain is so important because you need to react to a very dynamic environment. Being able to predict what the environment is gonna do is, of course, providing you an ability to act on time. So using machine learning on demand forecasting and price forecasting is becoming very important. Third example is around, as we were saying before, you need scenarios, and the tool to build scenarios is optimization and simulation of complex system. You look at the whole supply chain, you could recreate the supply chain in model, and then you use the model to actually do planning, scheduling, footprint optimization. Sometimes it's called digital twins, but what we mean is really representing your supply chain in a model to be able to optimize and simulate. And finally, I would say automation and digitization of all transactional processes. And transactional processes is, for example, pulling data, validating the data. These are activities that nowadays are taking a very large amount of people's time. And we want to automate as much as we can all these activities so that people actually can spend time analyzing and thinking about scenarios and solving the business problem rather than dealing with, I would say, a data or less interesting problem. So those are 4 examples I would call out. And unfortunately, there's not one tool or one solution that covers all of them. So if you want to tackle these different angles, you actually will need to have a multitude of products. We also create complexities on your architecture because you need to be able to use all these tools together, but also on your ecosystem because most likely you will be working with external partners. So there's multiple layers of answers you can bring to the supply chain problem and multiple solutions you need to bring together.
Yeah, but Lapo, despite not having a silver bullet, let's say, right, for you to drive resilience and to generate impact on your supply chain, I would say that you should start deploying from somewhere. There's no need for you, to have anxiety on deploying 5, 10 different tools at the same time. You need to choose those that have more impact on your supply chain and starting from there. This is super important because what we see a lot is paralysis on where to start or trying to start a bunch of things at the same time. So this is also a very important point to consider when thinking on supply chain, digital, and advanced analytics tools.
Absolutely. I mean, in the end, all these tools will be interacting with each other. But if you start building all of them at the same time, can be a very big challenge. So you want to break it into pieces, and with the concept we were discussing before, which is agility. We want to start from whatever is the most important and then build on it.
So Edson, what is the typical impact seen in these tech-enabled supply chain transformations that you mentioned? And do you have any examples that you could give?
Based in our experience of deploying such projects in different clients across the globe, right, throughout the years, the impact comes into several dimensions of the supply chain, I would say, right? It's important to disclaim before giving the impact ranges that the ranges I'm going to say, they are pretty broad. And the reason why it depends on the industry that we are talking about, also depending on the geography where the company is actually operating, as well as its starting point. Because there are companies that they are already, let's say, more advanced in terms of having such solutions, and there are companies that are just starting their journey. So this is pretty much the difference between the ranges. But what we see, which is a very significant number, is an increase from 2 to 6% in profit margin by deploying, let's say, the right combination of tools, as Lapo was mentioning before, right? Also, when you think about inventory optimization, the numbers we see is about 10 to 30% reduction. And it's a health reduction, I would say, because the tools will actually provide you visibility of where you need to place your inventory, how much of inventory you should have in each place to better serve your clients. Also, a third dimension of impact is about CO2 reduction, which is a top of mind nowadays when we talk about sustainability. And we see ranges from 5 to 10% CO2 emission reduction when deploying advanced analytic tools. And these are, let's say, the key KPIs impacted. But one thing that is super important is about the agility to take the decision making, to take the decisions, right? So what we see is an increase from 30 to 50% in the timing for you to react on your supply chain, taking decisions. And this is super important because many times nowadays when a disruption occurs, a company takes several days or even weeks for them to have a new scenario to actually deploy on the supply chain. And the tools make it much faster, enabling them to take these decisions in hours sometimes. So these are like most of the impacts that we see by deploying such tools.
And one I would add, which is hard to quantify, but I think as important as the other that you mentioned, Edson, is employee satisfaction. Because if you look at how much time is spent today solving for data issues, for lack of coordination, if you can translate all of that into actually focusing on solving the hard problem at the core of the business, that makes your day much more enjoyable. So we have seen a significant increase in satisfaction across the board.
Lapo, what are the key factors for successfully adopting and implementing these technologies that we were talking about?
So this is a very good question. And in order to answer that, we actually looked at 50 companies that went through transformations of their supply chain. And we looked at what are the common themes that we can see across those that actually succeeded. The first one is value-driven design. And what we mean by that is you should always have in mind at the very beginning, what is the value that whatever change you introduce is going to bring you. You should not go after technology for the sake of it, but really looking at your objective, which is a better performing supply chain, more resilient supply chain, and use that as a guiding principle. The second one is not focus only on technology, but actually also look at business processes and talent. These two elements are often forgotten. We are much more excited about the new model and the new shiny tool, but without people who are actually able to use these tools and processes, business processes that are supporting them in their decision making, those tools actually don't generate value. And finally, I would say is having a broad view on what it takes in terms of technological implementation. And when we look at these tools, as we were saying, there's many tools, many data sources. All of this needs to be integrated into a well-oiled ecosystem. And having that perspective from the very beginning saves a lot of time and prevents some of the failures.
And I think it's important to mention, right, Lapo, that all these factors, they are as important as the digital tool deployment itself, right? Because having the digital tool for the sake of having or doing it, it will not unlock the full potential that you have. So you need to address process, you need to address capability building, you need to address the tech enablers so that you will be able to unlock the full potential that this tool can actually bring to you.
And use the technology properly in the best way.
That's possible. Correct.
Okay. And Edson, with all these new technologies that you two just mentioned, how can companies address change management and the adoption of these new tools?
Mari, that's a super important question, I would say. And we got that question a lot, right? Because people, when deploying such tools, they are concerned about the adoption regarding sustainability over time, right? Because you're actually changing the way that people do the work. And sometimes the professionals, they've been in the company for 15, 20, 30 years, and we're actually providing different tools, different process for them to move forward, right? So I would highlight 4 dimensions that are critical for successful change management. One of them is you need to create conviction on the stakeholders that will be involved. They need to understand why this tool is being deployed, why this change is happening, why the company is actually taking this path forward, right? So creating this conviction is critical. The second point, which links back to the first one, is ensure that this change story comes from the top leadership, from the top team. So the users, the professionals, they will be more likely to understand the importance of it, right? The importance of the technology in the company's agenda, for example. At third, I would say that you need to involve the users since the beginning when designing and when creating the digital and advanced analytics tools. You need to make them part of the solution, right? So they will feel involved, they will feel heard, and this will increase a lot the likelihood of adoption afterwards, right? And last but not least, providing the right capability building for these people are also crucial, because we are just mentioning before, right? There is a change on the type of activities that a person does in a company that is going through such transformation in their supply chain. Today, there's a lot of transactional and manual work that will be, let's say, converted to more analytical kind of tasks because they need to use the solution, interpret the results, and then take decisions, right? So these 4 are super important for addressing change management properly.
And if you let me, I would add a 5th one, which is you need a lighthouse. And what I mean is this journey that we are describing can be long and hard because you need to change like how a whole group of people across the company operates. And you need to have an early success that everyone can look at as exciting and providing significant advantages to the company and to the individuals. If you have such lighthouse at the very beginning, that everything else is easier because people understand why we need to go through this change and what are the benefits that they will get out of it.
Yeah,
that's super important.
That's very interesting, and they feel engaged in the purpose of the change. Great. As we are reaching the end of our session, Lapo, what would you recommend for CEOs who are watching us today and are eager to take action on this topic?
That's a great question. And to be honest with you, supply chain until recently was not top of mind for CEOs. And as you said in the previous episode, it's not a sexy topic. This is changing because supply chain is so important to the performance of the whole company, but it also requires C-level executives to actually be leading the transformation. It cannot be an activity which is only touching operations and only the CEO should be involved. This is like a whole company going through a transformation because supply chain is at the core. It connects everything together, so it cannot be successful unless the CEO and all the executives are leading the charge. The second that we already mentioned is around implementation of technology for the sake of it is never leading to any good results. You need to really have the value that is going to be providing you in mind and have technology only as the mean to get there. In addition, incentives in the company needs to be aligned with the transformation. And I'm not only thinking about financial incentives, but also how people are rewarded for the work they do. How this change and digital change is accounted for when people are evaluated. It's very important to show that the company is really, this is not something that happens now, this is like something to stay. And finally, I would say never underestimate the importance of enablers. We talked about redesigning processes, building capabilities, thinking about the data and tech infrastructure. All these things cannot be second thoughts. You need to have them top of mind from the beginning so that you don't need to rework or slow down the transformation.
And I would just highlight, right, Lapo, your first point that supply chain is not only the supply chain function itself in a company, right? When we are talking about building resilience, deploying digital analytics tools, these actually involve, let's say, many areas of the company, because supply chain is a cross-functional discipline. So it means that it requires sales, marketing, production, procurement, finance to actually be actively involved in such transformations, in such deployments.
Thank you very much, Edson and Lapo, for being here and explaining and giving us this masterclass and this course about supply chain and technology. It was great. Thank you very much. And I'll have you again invited for the next episode.
Thank you, Mari.
Obrigado.
Oh, that's nice. E muito obrigada também a você que nos acompanha em vídeo ou em podcast. Para entrar em contato com os nossos especialistas ou enviar perguntas, o nosso e-mail é mckinsey-talks@mckinsey.com. A nossa agenda completa também está no mckinseytalks.com. Lá você pode conferir este episódio e os anteriores em vídeo ou em podcast. E se você gosta do McKinsey Talks, compartilhe esse episódio com seus amigos e colegas. É isso aí, muito obrigada e até a próxima!